all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 7th episode, our target is Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian, developed by 20th Century Fox, 21 Laps Entertainment, 1492 Pictures, and Dune Entertainment, and distributed by 20th Century Fox. Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian first got announced when the writers of the first film, Robert Ben Garant and Thomas Lennon, revealed that a sequel was in the works, with the working title Another Night at the Museum. The film released on Memorial Day weekend on May 22, 2009, and earned $413.1 million on a budget of $150 million. The film saw pretty mixed reviews and even some negative reviews, and was nominated for 7 awards, of which it won 1 of. Shawn Levy returned as the director, and Robert Ben Garant and Thomas Lennon returned as writers. The producers also returned, being Shawn Levy, Chris Columbus, and Michael Barnathan, and Alan Silvestri returned as the composer. The cinematography was done by John Schwartzman, and Don Zimmerman returned as the editor, including his twin brother, Dean Zimmerman. Much of the original cast returned, including Ben Stiller, Robin Williams, Mizuho Peck, Steve Coogan, Owen Wilson, Patrick Gallagher, Rami Malek, and Crystal the Monkey. The cast also sees new cast members including Amy Adams, Bill Hader, Hank Azaria, Christopher Guest, Alan Shabat, and John Bernthal. The film follows Larry 3 years after the first film, where he has now grown his business and has no longer been working as the night security guard. He goes to visit the exhibits in the museum again, but learns that some of the exhibits are being moved to the Smithsonian Institution, and without the tablet that turns them to life, meaning that they will be separated and without freedom. Later, Larry receives a call from Jedediah, the miniature cowboy, informing him that Dexter the monkey stole the tablet and brought it to the Smithsonian with them, bringing everyone there to life, including Pharaoh Akhmun-Ra's older brother, Ka-Mun-Ra, who wants to steal the tablet to raise his army of the dead and rule the world. Larry travels to the Smithsonian to rescue them, where he is assisted by the exhibit of Major General George A. Custer, who is immediately captured and put with the rest of Larry's friends. Larry then runs into Amelia Earhart, who is eager to join him. Soon after, Larry is captured by Ka-Mun-Ra and forced to give over the tablet. However, Ka-Mun-Ra fails to figure out the code, so he traps Jedediah in an hourglass, forcing Larry to break the code before the sand buries him. Amelia and Larry go looking for the answer to the code under the watchful eye of Ka-Mun-Ra's hired help, the exhibits of Ivan the Terrible, Napoleon, and Al Capone. They manage to get the code to Ka-Mun-Ra, and he uses it to unleash an army of the dead, though they are instantly run away after Larry's friends return with the help of the good museum exhibits in the Smithsonian, including Amelia Earhart, General Custer, and the giant statue of Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial. This leads to the Battle of the Smithsonian, where Larry manages to retrieve the tablet and push Ka-Mun-Ra through the door to the army of the undead. After this, Larry and his friends return to the Natural History Museum, and Larry resumes his post as night guard after selling his company and making an anonymous donation to the museum with the request that the exhibits that were leaving stay. As I stated in my review of Monsters University, an important thing to do when expanding upon a previous story is to keep the good continuity by making the world feel the same, while also expanding upon the idea in a reasonable way. This movie, I feel, has both good bits of continuity and bad bits as well. Let's start with the good. This movie does a great job of expanding upon the original's concept by having the characters go to the Smithsonian. It opens up a new world to explore with not only new characters, but new concepts as well, such as paintings and statues. Bad bits of continuity are most present, unfortunately, in keeping what the previous movie set up. Larry's family isn't present in the film, with the exception of his son for brief moments in the beginning, which is unfortunate as his son is his motivation in the first film. Another thing is the idea that not having control when the museum exhibits come to life leads to destruction that other humans will see. In this film, there is so much property damage done to the Smithsonian, and yet not one thing is said about it. It just happens, and that's that. One thing I want to mention here is that the original museum exhibits aren't present much in this film. As I will discuss in a moment, the film is bloated with many plot lines, which leads to some stuff being sidelined. Unfortunately, one of these things is the original characters, most of whom are trapped for the vast majority of the movie, and some, like Teddy, are rarely in the movie at all. Overall, the continuity does a good job expanding the original, but not so much in keeping up with what was. One of my biggest complaints with the original film was its pacing. I believe that the film spent too much time on setup, which led to less time being spent on the fun concept of museum exhibits that come to life. This film, in my opinion, managed to fix that problem by making it worse. Let me explain. This film's pacing is pretty much non-existent, as there is no distinguishable first, second, and third act. The film pretty much just consists of running around the Smithsonian and leading to the most of the film feeling like the third act of the last film, where the concept of museum exhibits coming to life gets fully realized. I think that this film's bad pacing actually ends up helping it a lot. This less structured plot pairs with the film's main goal, which, in my opinion, should be to have fun. When I hear about a film about a museum that comes to life, I'm not going into it expecting a really deep and inspiring theme. I'm just in it for the fun story that results from the fun concept. I think that the first film's biggest flaw lies here. It spends too much time on this realistic plotline of Larry's struggles to see any project through. And that's okay, but where the problem arises is when that plotline is spent too much time on and ends up taking away from the fun stuff. Some might disagree with me, but I think that by lessening the time spent on Larry's personal life, especially now that we have a good idea of who he is thanks to the original, it allows for so much more fun and creative scenes to take place. To elaborate on this point a bit more, I wanted to list a few characters/jokes in the film that I found to be funny. First, General Custer, who Larry meets when first arriving at the Smithsonian, only to be captured immediately and spends the rest of the film with the museum exhibits from the first film, trying to come up with the plan to escape. The way he continues to come up with plans, only for someone to find the obvious fault in the plan, leading to his silence, is hilarious, and I really wish he was in the film more, but I am glad they continued the joke when he showed up for the final battle. Plus, he has a kind of nice but ultimately underdeveloped character arc about not being afraid of failure. Unfortunately, Robin Williams' character, Teddy, doesn't appear in the film much. I think it may be because he was busy, as he also starred in 2 other films this year, but luckily he does get a cameo in the middle part of the film as a statue of Teddy that only has a head and upper torso. The way the Teddy statue becomes envious of the other Teddy Larry tells him about was funny. Another part of the film I really liked is its various times the characters interacted with the pictures on the walls that also turned to life and led to many funny and creative jokes. I could go on, but I think my point is clear. This new pacing compared to the first one allowed for many more funny characters and bits. However, unfortunately, not everything in the film it was on the same level. I personally wouldn't call the first night at the museum movie to be a comedy. I think that it is much more in the story progression, so to see that this movie had more jokes was a nice surprise. Though I think there are a fair bit of jokes that have poor timing, as they just go on for way too long. Not all the jokes are like this, as I have already stated, but there are some jokes that last for what feels like an entire minute, and honestly might be, where there is just 2 characters going back and forth about something that, to me at least, really isn't that funny. I wouldn't call call it out if it only happened once, but I can think of at least 2 instances right now where this happened, and I am certain that it happened more than that. Also, while we're on the topic of things that I found annoying, they occasionally sing random popular songs at times, but luckily none of them last too long, and it must have been my lucky day, because none of them got stuck in my head. Haha. One of the characters that I found to be rather interesting was Amelia Earhart. She essentially fills the role of Teddy in the first film, being Larry's guide to navigating the place. What I found to be interesting about her is when she occasionally gets defensive about Larry's remarks, thinking that he doesn't think she is capable of handling dangerous situations, when in reality he isn't doing that at all. At first, I thought the film was trying to make a joke about the change in time periods, where back in her day, Amelia had to constantly prove her capability to people, but nowadays that's not necessarily the case, and it now leads to Amelia coming off as overly defensive. But what confused me at some points is when it seems like they're being serious about Amelia needing to prove herself to Larry, and it just leads to me feeling a bit confused. That aside, Amelia actually serves as a fun companion to Larry, both managing to guide him along the way, while also not feeling like this film's version of Teddy. Amelia manages to be different enough that it makes her own character, and not just a lazy retelling of the first film, where the character helps Larry through his arc. Speaking of Larry's character arc, he has one in this film. It isn't as prominent as the first film, which is why I haven't mentioned it yet, and similarly, it isn't all that well written either. Essentially, Larry has now grown his business to be extremely successful, but in the process has managed to lose all joy for it because it is all business meetings and commercials. He realizes that he isn't as happy as he was with his job at the museum, which is what prompts him to visit it again in the first place. Throughout the film, he tells the Smithsonian's exhibits who he is and explains his inventions to them, but he lacks any joy or passion for his work. In the end, after his adventure in the Smithsonian, he realizes that true happiness isn't from success or money, but loving what you do. The message isn't incredibly well written or well realized one, but it fits well enough for the plot of the film, and I find it to be a good one, so I wanted to give it some praise, but also not linger on it too long because I don't have anything much more interesting to say on the matter. I will give Night at the Museum Battle of the Smithsonian an 8 out of 10, bordering on a 7 out of 10, for being a consistently fun time that expands upon the first movie well, even if it doesn't necessarily serve as a good sequel in terms of the first film's character. I think this film is everything a Night at the Museum movie should be, and a little more in some areas, and maybe a little less in some too. The film still lacks its well-roundedness, as time is still missing from getting good character moments throughout, but I can say with confidence that I am excited to see how the trilogy wraps up, and cautiously optimistic to see what the animated movie does. Overall, there just isn't a whole lot else to say on the film. It is a good time that serves its purpose well, and I would recommend it if you enjoyed the first film. I think that this one is better than the original, as it is just allowed to have a bit more fun throughout. Ka Moon-ra and his henchmen serve as a constant threat to keep the plot exciting, and bits of randomness, such as when Oscar the Grouch and Darth Vader, of all people, randomly show up, and allow for some comedic moments, even if they don't all land. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.